Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We got a few things to go through real quick, and I'm sorry, there's going to be a rant at the beginning of this, so this video is going to go a little bit longer than usual. My apologies in advance. I just didn't want to have to do 3 videos this morning right off the bat. So, first of all, first things first, to get that out of the way. Folks, as always, the link to this document for the FDA executive summary can be found in the description. You'll also find the video that kicked all these series of videos on the JRC off and why, out of nowhere, I'm restarting all this in the description. Well, it's going to be Stop the Shocks campaign reignites. And do watch the whole video. It is traumatic to watch. It does depict footage, actual live footage of an autistic gentleman being tortured. But I think it's very important to watch so you know how real life this is. Number 2, towards the end, you'll get the information as to why I'm going so hard on this. Also included in the description is the link to shut down the Judge Rotenberg Center petition on change.org. All right, folks, now for the rant. And I'm trying not to. I'm trying to be kind. But folks, I need you to understand inspirational stories about the kind sibling that takes their poor autistic sibling to the prom is not the compliment that you think it is. It's inspiration porn. Now, I've had multiple people, I'm not singling this person out by any means, explain to me how parents might use a said story like this to build empathy. But there are issues with that, quite a few of them. First and foremost, it puts the emphasis on the otherness of the person that is actually autistic. It puts the focus on the so-called inability of said autistic to be able to obtain their own date. It also more focuses on the neurotypical sibling swooping in to save their autistic sibling than it does the actual autistic person themselves. It uplifts the neurotypical person who, out of the great kindness in their heart, decided to take pity on their autistic sibling and take them to the prom. It's condescending. It emphasizes otherness, and it reinforces the trope of the poor, tragic figure of the disabled person. And quite frankly, we're all very tired of seeing it. I understand wanting to build bridges between the parent groups and the self-advocacy groups. I get that. I do. I've been spending the last 13 plus years doing exactly that. However, these kind of stories is not the way to create empathy. The best way to create empathy is communication between the two groups. It's going to be conversations behind closed doors. It's going to be the uniting of goals. My example of this is how many parent groups backed up the self-advocates when we began to go after the JRC many, many years ago. We can come together, and we can come together the best when it's done over conversation and mutual understanding, not this condescending inspiration porn bullshit. Do you know how often people like me who are known autistics in their towns get congratulated and held on a pedestal for doing something as simple as going to work every day and going to the grocery store to buy our own groceries? This isn't a joke. All we ask is to be treated like everybody else. For us to go to the grocery store and buy our own groceries, to not be clapped at like we are celebrating the fact that our toddler just used the potty for the first time. It's the same energy. It's infantilization. It may be unintentional. You may have all the best intentions in the world, but you do know what they say about good intentions. You know, the path to hell and all of that. Communication between the two groups is key. Mutual respect is key. Focus not constantly being on the otherness of the people with the actual disability is key. Not exalting the neurotypical kindness is also key. You hear what I'm saying? Inspiration porn is not the best way to go about building empathy and reinforcing kindness. Everyone should be kind to everyone. That is what should be taught. Not that we should be singled out, infantilized, and upheld as special needs all the damn time. And isn't it inspirational they went to the prom? The same thing that neurotypicals do every day. Now, if you have a neurotypical child and you aren't writing inspirational stories about their prom date, why is it appropriate to do it with someone who's on the spectrum? Let that marinate in your head a while, okay? I'm glad we got that cleared up. All right. All that being said, let's get back to it, folks. We are starting on 6.2 today. The investigational use of ESDs, remember that is electric skin shock devices, for aversive conditioning under other portions of the 21 CFR 50 subpart D. Now, apologies in advance if I absolutely mangle any scientific terms or jargon or trip over my words. It is relatively early. Okay. Should a clinical investigation using ESDs for aversive conditioning not be approvable under 21 CFR 50.52? There are 3 additional categories of clinical investigations in children that may be considered under FDA regulations at 21 CFR 50 subpart D. These categories include investigations that pose no more than minimal risk, 21 CFR 50.51, or a minor increase over minimal risk, 21 CFR 50.53, and a category for investigations that are not approvable under 50.51, 50.52, or 50.53, 21 CFR 50.54. Due to the serious of the known risks of ESDs, the agency has determined that the risk of ESDs for aversive conditioning exceed minimal risk, 21 CFR 50.51, or a major increase over conditioning would be used, is not approvable under either of these categories. The remaining category under which a research protocol using ESDs for aversive conditioning in children might be considered 21 CFR 50.54 involves a referral by an IRB, consultation with the Pediatric Advisory Committee, and final determination by the FDA Commissioner that the clinical investigation presents a reasonable opportunity to further understanding, prevention, alleviation of a serious problem affecting the health or welfare of children, that the clinical investigations will be conducted in accordance with sound ethical principles, and that the adequate provisions are made for soliciting the assent of children and permission of their parents or guardians as set forth in 50.55. The agency is concerned that a study using ESDs for aversive conditioning does not meet these criteria. So basically, what they're saying in these two couple of paragraphs is that under ethical treatment guidelines, even doing so much as a controlled study in regards to the risks and benefits of the ESDs is considered completely unethical by their own code. Get that? They won't even do a controlled study because that's how unethical it is. And you want to tell me it's the best thing for your child? Okay, Karen. Finally, an adequate assent permission process is required under 21 CFR 50.55, does not make an otherwise impermissible study permissible. Until the agency determines that a study could be designed that is both scientifically sound and ethically justified, it would not be justifiable to ask subjects to enroll. Although the above analysis applies to the investigational use of ESDs for aversive conditioning in children, there is also concern about the acceptability of the use of these devices in adults. This is especially true of adults who are not capable of providing informed consent, since the same vulnerability exists that supports the need for additional safeguards for pediatric studies, as provided by 21 CFR Part 50, Part D. Why do you have to insist that we don't know what's going on? For the love of God. Nonverbal does not mean retarded. You shouldn't do the electric shocks anyway. God. Moving on. In investigations on both pediatric and adult subjects, the FDA regulations at 21 CFR 56-111 require that the risks of the study are minimized, the risks are reasonable in relation to anticipated benefits and knowledge that may be expected to result from the study, and that selection of subjects for the study must be equitable. FDA would have concerns that the risks to subjects are not appropriately minimized, and the rights, safety, and welfare of subjects, particularly ones with developmental disabilities, would not be adequately protected if a less restrictive therapy exists with a more favorable risk-benefit profile. Finally, there are practical limitations on any data that might be collected in a clinical trial of aversive conditioning ESDs. As discussed above, as far as the FDA is aware, ESDs for aversive conditioning are only in use at the single institution in the U.S., JRC. Conducting a study at a single institution would limit the generalizability of the study results. Study results would be difficult to interpret due to the unavoidable confounding effect of other treatments the subjects receive. Attempts to assess the psychological benefits or harms of device use would likely be similarly confounded. Although the risks of a retrospective study that examined existing patient records for evidence of safety and effectiveness of ESDs may be permissible under FDA regulations, the ability of such data to provide sufficient valid scientific evidence to support a reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness is questionable. Thus, it is unclear whether the scientifically credible and ethically appropriate studies can be designed to establish the safety or effectiveness of these devices. 6.3, we'll go ahead and cover that. I'm going to finish my rant up and kind of go over everything we just took a look at, and we'll go ahead and get off of here. 6.3, clinical use of ESDs for aversive conditioning. When the U.S. National Commission published in 1978 the seminal report on research involving children that became the basis for current federal regulations, they explicitly modeled the criteria balancing risk and potential under 21 CFR 50.52 on considerations a clinician would use when determining whether a particular intervention or procedure would be appropriate for their patient. This provides grounds for expanding the previous discussion regarding the risks and potential benefits of the device in the investigational context into the clinical context. Thus, the agency is also concerned that the harms associated with the use of the ESDs for aversive conditioning in the clinical setting may not be justified by the potential benefits, even in populations that may be considered refractory. So, basically, what these 2 pages are covering is, first of all, the FDA believes it goes against their code of ethics in order to conduct a controlled study to see the risk benefits of electric skin shock devices. Interesting, isn't it? Second one goes over basically the idea of a few things. Let me reread it real quick. Bear with me. Basically, it was going over how even it would go against a clinician's idea when there are other practices that are out there that are not adversive, which we've gone over before. So, that pretty much sums that up. It's unethical. Who knew, right? God, if even someone as backwards as the FDA can get it, what is wrong with everybody else, right? Just saying. Now, to finish my rant up that I started at the beginning of this video, I know there are those who are going to say that there are varying degrees of autism, and someone like me who is so articulate and has such the ability to be able to communicate against others that not everybody is like me. I know that. I've said it before in other videos. I'm more than just an autistic self-advocate. I'm also a person who has worked in this field in a professional capacity, okay? I have acted as a professional in the field in a professional capacity. So that means I know what I'm talking about. And when I talk about these things like inspiration porn, I'm not just talking from my general perspective. I have worked with autistics who are nonverbal. I have worked with the parents who are so overwhelmed that they have bars on the windows. Okay? I have worked with individuals who are in the day centers. Okay? All right? Now, there's this myth out there about autism, and a lot of parents get themselves swept up in it. This idea, this concept that because I can communicate on a neurotypical level in a way that a neurotypical can best understand, that somehow I am higher functioning. And there's this idea of high functioning and low functioning. And that the high functioning who are on social media can't possibly understand the low functioning. Okay, wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, those nonverbals that you feel like you need to be their voice for because they can't communicate actually have their own community on Twitter. They type, they tell us about their experiences every single day. Many nonverbals also have the ability to use sign language. Not all of them do. I understand that. Some use communication boards. Some prefer to type. You see what I mean? This assumption of inability goes across the board. Okay? Not to mention, functionality fluctuates. Okay? And let me tell you what I mean. I'm going to give you an example. Right now, I am extremely articulate, as you would say. speak intelligently. I speak well. I was classically trained on how to give speeches, by the way, so that is by and large a large part of it, why I can come off the way that I do. But, however, functionality fluctuates. Many, many moons ago, when I was a young teenager, about the age of 16, I went through what we call autistic burnout, what they would call in clinical areas regression. We kind of really hate that word, but for the sake of parents' understanding, we'll call it regression. And when I was in that burnout and I went into regression, I regressed back so much. I literally had to re-potty train myself. Okay? Literally had to re-potty train myself. That level of regression. Okay? So, in your opinion, that would put me more towards the level of what you would consider more severe, right? I wasn't the most communicative or verbal in the world during that time. I had to basically relearn to do everything after spending years of cooking for myself, cleaning for myself, taking care of everything, and then it was gone. Like that. And I had to relearn everything and get back to my previous level of functionality. Okay? Now, not all functionality levels seem to go to those level of extremes, but it does happen. So that myth of low functioning and high functioning is not quite what you think it is. Autistics have more understanding of one another, no matter where we are on the functionality scale for that given day, than any outside parent will ever have. Because we, at the core of it, as different as we may be, all have the same traits. Let me give you an example. The difference between me being in a room full of neurotypicals and communicating and being in a room full of autistics and communicating is literally night and day. I'll just put it like that. It was the autistics, not the neurotypicals around me, not the carers, not the professionals, not the doctors. It was my fellow autistics, my fellow neurodiverse, people with ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, what have you, that busted me out of my shell. That got me more comfortable with being out and around people and crowds. Not the gradual forcing that they tell carers to do, but being around my own tribe. So, just wanted to get out there. I don't know where I'm further going with this rant, but before this video gets any longer and I miss the opportunity to get the other video I intended done, let me go ahead and wrap things up here by saying we don't get very many views on this channel, folks, and the few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this afternoon, and as always, folks, we here at Smelling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.